This is how they get away with everything that they get away with. And these are the most corrupt places on the planet. And most people don't even know that they exist. They have their own laws. You can do whatever you want. And if you can't accomplish what you're trying to accomplish, all you've got to do is get yourself invited into some of these meetings and they'll change the rules for you. You know, especially if it's 3 a.m. and you're at a strip club, anything goes. This is where I found myself. Really quickly, you realize, like, holy shit, they're making their decisions and they're wasted. And, you know, it's like the more degenerate that it gets, the more serious it gets, which sounds super crazy. But it's like they have to have this degeneracy in order to live with themselves, I think, because what they're doing it's terrible. They're terrible people doing terrible things.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Practical Liberty. My name's Henry Bingaman. I know there's my audience size has just about doubled in the last month, which is awesome. So if you came in on the Rechtenwald or Josh Smith interviews, I just want you to know I don't always do political stuff. In fact, I mostly don't do political stuff. This show is built around what I call the 4 cornerstones of liberty, which are security, wealth, awareness, and network. And so I'm doing another Bitcoin related episode because, you know, it occurred to me that Bitcoin actually hits all 4 of those cornerstones in one. You have the security of your money. You actually own it. There's obviously the wealth aspect. Most money is going down in value. Bitcoin's actually going up. There's the awareness. I've never met a crowd of people that kind of understands what's going on in the world more than Bitcoiners. And then the network is just amazing. You meet so many cool people through these Bitcoin communities. And my guest today is somebody that I met through the Bitcoin community. Michelle, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to talk to you. I honestly wasn't entirely sure how far along in your orange pilling journey you were, but it sounds like you're there. It sounds like you're a full-on Bitcoiner, and I'm really excited to hear that.
Well, it's funny. So about a year ago, so actually right at the peak of the market, I took a huge position in crypto, which is
Okay. It's okay. Everybody starts there, except, you know.
about half of it was Bitcoin. Like that was the mainstay of the position.
Okay.
But then I bought Fetch, I bought Ethereum, I bought Cardano, a lot of Cardano. I did all these like just not the best. I don't want to call them shit coins, but everybody knows they're shit coins.
Altcoins.
Altcoins. But as of probably a month or two ago, I am 100% portfolio in Bitcoin as far as the crypto goes. So it's, you know, there's only one crypto and his name is Bitcoin. So I'm there now.
Good job. Okay. Well, we have all had our sort of shitcoin journey. I shouldn't say all of us, but I think everybody who has been in for a while. And you know, it's a learning. It's a very hard. There's a learning curve, and like everything else, the more you know, you know. So it takes time to understand and to really be super convicted and to understand. I mean, especially if you're coming from like a non-technical position or a non-informed about financial markets and things like that. I mean, it's complicated.
Well, for me, I've been involved in like stocks and financial publishing in that world for a long time. So I was looking at it as just different ticker symbols. So there's all these different
Sure.
companies, right? And all those companies have intrinsic value. Not all
Right.
cryptos have intrinsic value. It's a very
Yeah.
different thing, but it's easy to get sucked into that stock market mentality when you're looking at crypto.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I started trading altcoins, you know, and at the time it was just it was crypto. And so you know, it's a journey. I think it's awesome for those people that come like straight in and it's Bitcoin only. And I think as more of us are out there and there's more awareness and education, you'll get more and more people entering the market that are just Bitcoin only. But we're still pretty early. So, you know, if you're coming in now or if you came in even a couple years ago, you're super early and you know, start in shitcoins, end up hardcore meat eat it, you know, you only eat meat and no seed oils and all that.
It is funny how aligned on most values people in the community end up being. It's like once you start digging into the truth about how money works, you start digging into the truth about, you know, how the government works and how the healthcare system works, and we all end up close to the same positions on most things.
Yeah, it is. It's true. And, you know, people call it a cult sometimes. I'm like, okay, sure. You know, sign me up. Like, yes, we're a cult. Like, you can join now or you can join later.
Yeah, you could be forced into this later when and stay poor,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So I want to get back into your history a little bit because you've spent a lot of time outside the U.S. I believe you live in Florida now.
I'm in Florida now. Yeah.
but you lived in Dubai for a while. I know you've worked in China. I think you said you've traveled to 40 or so countries. So how did you end up in the UAE, first of all? Because that's not somewhere a lot of Americans end up, pinched between Iran and Saudi Arabia. It's
Yeah.
not a natural home for most Americans.
Right, right. That's really what drew me there. So I've always kind of gone against the grain. I have a background in computer science, so I was working in tech and I was in DC, which, is its own story. But I did not want to go to Silicon Valley. I was with a series of startups and ended up being like shut down. One of the startups I was working for got acquired, and basically everybody I knew moved out to Silicon Valley. And I was like, I'm not doing it. I wasn't really involved in politics. I kind of did some Tea Party stuff in DC for a while, but I was always kind of just like, I want to be left alone. So I just sort of stuck my foot in the sand. I was like, I'm not moving to Silicon Valley. I don't know what I'm gonna do. Um, but I'm going to figure out something interesting. And I really wanted to go visit Asia. And as luck would have it, really, I had a good friend from when I had been much younger who was living in Abu Dhabi. I was like, well, let me go visit this place. I have no idea where it is, but I had started doing some traveling and kind of got bored very quickly. So I was looking for more interesting places to go. I wanted to go to Asia, and I don't know how much I knew about Dubai, not very much, but I went and visited a friend that I had over there and ended up extending my stay. I just sort of kept like canceling my return flight. So I went over initially for several weeks. And by the time I went back to DC, by the time my family went back, I was like, this is where I'm going. I'm not going to go live in California. This is what I'm going to do. And there was a heavy startup community in Dubai, which surprises a lot of people. But there was really a lot going on over there in the startup community. So I just did everything I needed to do to get over there and kind of fled the country. I went to Dubai. I didn't have a job, but I got one pretty quickly working for a startup incubator. And then I worked for a startup over there. And that kind of started this whole journey.
So I didn't know you could just move to a country and look for a job later, especially in, wealthier countries typically. And the United Arab Emirates is a fairly wealthy country. They don't typically let in people just looking for jobs. So how does the immigration or the visa process over there work? Just out of curiosity.
So do you know what a visa run is called?
Yes.
Or do you know what a visa run is? So I had never heard of a visa run, but if you leave the United States and you kind of get ingrained in the travel community, you learn really quickly what a visa run is. And what a visa run is basically when you go somewhere on a tourist visa, and depending on where you're from and where you're going, you can go to the UAE. I think it's only 30 days. A lot of places it's 90 days. But then you can do a visa run. And so I'm not necessarily advocating for this, but you can get on a bus and go to, say, Oman and get an exit stamp and then get an entry stamp back in. And it's just a little bit of like shuffling. A lot of people in Asia do it. You can take like a 20-minute flight into Singapore, stay in Singapore for the weekend, and then like go back wherever you want. So it is, it's definitely like a high risk, high reward situation. But I've kind of always been that way. And so I went initially just on a tourist visa. And I thought, if this doesn't work out, I'd made good money in tech. And I was pretty confident that I could get another job, whether I made good money, decent money, whatever it was, some kind of job. And so luckily it worked out. But I just kind of was like, well, even if it doesn't work out, it's been great. Like, I'll just take a little bit of a break. I was a little burnt out. I'd been at the particular startup that I'd been at. I was working like, 7 days a week for a couple of years. So it was like, if this ends up being a vacation, that's fine. And if I can make this work, then that's awesome.
Yeah, U.S. Startup culture has a high burnout rate just for that reason, that they drive you so hard to get that exit. But it does pay well if it works. Unfortunately, when the startup busts and you've worked 7 days a week for 2 years, it's not worth it. So you ended up in foreign direct investment, right?
I did.
One of the things I've noticed about people that get really orange pilled, really down the rabbit hole, is they've seen a corrupt side of the financial institution, and they've seen the dark side of how either international finance or even just domestic finance or central banking or something like that works. So, I mean, can you kind of describe what foreign direct investment is, and then tell people why it is the spawn of Satan?
Yeah. Yes. So I had absolutely no clue what foreign direct investment was, and I was completely honest about that. Um, so I'm in Dubai, like living my best life. I end up in Thailand visiting a friend from college, and he just happened to be speaking at a conference. It was a free trade zone conference in Bangkok. Had no idea what a free trade zone was. He was living in China at the time, had no idea what he was doing over there. But kind of attended the tail end of this conference and started talking to this guy who started trying to recruit me. So I was like, look, I don't know what I'm like Googling FDI. FDI stands for foreign direct investment, which is really vague. And I think that they keep it vague on purpose because they don't want anybody to know what's going on. They want you to feel stupid. They want you to be like, oh, that's too complicated for me. But the truth is that it's not complicated at all. It's money from a country or an entity that goes to another country or entity. It's just international commerce, really. Um, but there's this really niche industry the higher up you go. So I think, you can boil it down to a local level, right? You have local communities and governments in your township or wherever you live. And then you sort of work your way up. You have in the United States, you have states. And then, of course, you have the United States as a country, and you have countries across the globe. And so the higher up you go, you kind of end up in this foreign direct investment world. And I say a lot that this is sort of the ecosystem that surrounds the World Economic Forum.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of made that up because I didn't even know what the Davos thing was when I got into this shit. But everybody that I met was just obsessed with Davos. There was a handful of them that had been to Davos, and anyone else who hadn't been, it was like their whole life mission to get invited. So that's kind of like the peak of the peak of FDI. And so as with everything else, you have tiers within the industry itself. But FDI is really just commerce happening between countries.
There's also an element to it, the way I understand it, at least, that there's some influence peddling that goes along with it. There's an element of somewhat, it's not exactly money laundering, but it's you remove the regulations or you create certain regulations around things. So there's tax avoidance schemes. It's just privilege.
Yes.
It creates a privileged class of investor.
Absolutely. So that's a great way to say it. I'm going to steal that from you. It does that, and it's happening on the country level. This is how they get away with everything that they get away with because most foreign direct investment is facilitated through these special economic zones. They're often called free trade zones or SEZs. And these are, the most corrupt places on the planet. And most people don't even know that they exist. So they have their own laws. You can do whatever you want, and if you can't accomplish what you're trying to accomplish, all you've got to do is get yourself invited into some of these meetings, and they'll change the rules for you. Especially if it's 3 a.m. and you're at a strip club, anything goes. I mean,
Old boys
and I
club.
say this because this is where I found myself, and really quickly you realize like what the f am I doing here? But then if you like start paying attention, you're like, holy shit, these people aren't just here for a good time. They're making their decisions and they're wasted. And, it's like the more degenerate that it gets, like the more I don't want to, I'm like, the more serious it gets, which sounds super crazy, but it's like they have to have this degeneracy in order to live with themselves, I think, because what they're doing is such crap. Like it's such bullshit. It's not good for people. No, it's not. It's terrible. They're
It's
terrible people doing terrible things.
the top tier of government officials and business CEOs, like mega corporate international people. They're like sociopaths and psychopaths are attracted to that position, and they're willing to put in the work to get there to screw everybody
Yes.
over. They are literally crazy. That's what allows for Epstein's Island to exist, that the most powerful
Yes.
people can get caught into a alleged underage sex scheme because
Right.
they're degenerates. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
horrible people.
Yeah. And you have to be able to live with yourself. I think, for a long time, like I went through this period of time where I was not active in the Bitcoin community. I was not like, I told no one what I had been through or the things that I'd seen, mostly because I didn't think that anyone would believe me. And of course I was a little worried about like repercussions, but primarily it was like nobody's going to believe me. Like I sound like a lunatic. Like I wouldn't believe me. But then COVID happened and I started watching COVID. It was in China and I'm like, it's coming here. Everyone's like, nah, you're a lunatic. And then it went to Italy and I'm like, it's coming here. And like, no, you're a lunatic. And then it showed up. And after COVID, people started taking my like lunacy a little bit seriously. So I started kind of thinking maybe people will start to believe me. And then I got more and more involved in the Bitcoin community. And I realized a lot of these people have seen, what I've seen also. But I think the point is that like they rely on, the level of insanity is so high that like what you've said about the island. I mean, if you take someone, you just pluck them from 10 years ago, say, and start telling them this stuff, you sound like a crazy person. And I think that works to their benefit. So I've been trying to like focus my message and I'm still working on it to make myself sound less crazy and try and like boil it down and make it digestible. But yeah, they're terrible people who, I think there's a lot of people like me who have seen a little bit of it and are probably too afraid to speak out and also just too afraid that they're going to sound like a crazy person, which is why it's become like almost my sole mission just to like communicate to people, please speak out and just say like the truth, like whatever you've seen, whatever you think, if you're just honest about it, we can shut so much of this down.
It's funny. I think the reason they canceled Alex Jones as hard as they did is because he's been saying this since like 1995. Like he's gone hard on it, but he's also been wrong about a lot of stuff. Now he went through his period of super alcoholism and divorce and all that stuff. So he went a little crazy in there, but he's been right about a lot of things and they had to shut it down. They had to show you that what his lawsuit for like billions of dollars or something that no,
Right.
like it was $100 billion or some absurd number that most nations couldn't pay
Right.
for allegedly lying about Sandy Hook. And he did say some messed up things, but he apologized for him. It's just one of those people get it wrong sometimes.
Yeah.
But they try to intimidate you. They want you to feel crazy for saying it. And the they is like it's the establishment. It's hard to say. It's the cathedral, right? It's the media, educational and government structure. So, I mean, it's not a nebulous they. It's actually institutions doing this to you.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been trying to replace the word they because I think, like you said, every time you say they, I think there's a lot of people that just tune it out. And when I talk about my time in DC, I use the unelected bureaucratic state, which I think is really accurate. But I'm still looking for a good replacement for the they in like crazy FDI lunacy upper echelon. Like how do you summarize that?
So, all right, let's go back to did you get orange pilled or discover Bitcoin, I should say, while you were still overseas in Dubai? Like that was how did you find your way into this weird world?
Yeah. So I started, I hate to admit this, but like many people, I started in crypto. And I was actually trading, altcoins for a fair amount of time. That's how I got out of the situation that I was in. And I don't recommend this to anyone. But I started because of the technology. I was at a conference in Cartagena, Colombia, sitting in a corner, just like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be here. And some young Russian kid came and sat down next to me and he was like, have you ever heard about Ethereum? Do you know what Bitcoin is? You can take self custody. You should Google that. And so I did. And this was like before the fork wars. This was Ethereum was proof of work. And, I started like, I set up a Google alert for both Ethereum and Bitcoin and just started reading everything that I could find. And it made sense to me from like a technical perspective because my background, is in computer science. And so that's how I got in initially. But I kind of like, I always knew there was more to it. And I spent a fair amount of time trading, making like swing trades. I got just super obsessed with the entire ecosystem. And that's how I got out of the situation that I was in. Again, I don't recommend that to anyone. I was reading shit, literally 24/7 just to make like a 20% margin on a trade once a week. So just buy, if I had just bought and held Bitcoin, I'd be in a much better position. But the journey to that level of knowledge takes time, and it took me a couple of years. So I was still in Dubai. I was kind of like at the end times coming. I came back to the States. It was really the very, very end of 2017. I normally just say 2018. Um, and I was kind of in hibernation for a year or two. I wasn't actively involved in anything. And then when COVID hit is when I kind of came back to Bitcoin and was like, okay, I need people that understand, what's going on. And where I found that was within the Bitcoin community. Um, so I've been, in crypto for a long time, and I would say that I got really hardcore orange pilled, in like 2020 during COVID is when I thought, okay, I'm gonna be more involved in this community and,
I mean, Bitcoin seems to be kind of it's your all-encompassing reality right now, right? You work for a crypto company. What
yeah,
is it? Byte Federal. Although
by
they
federal,
do
yeah.
they do trade some shit coins too, apparently.
They do. I'm working on it. You know, it it's a great place. It's full of like hardcore anti-communists. We got like all of our developers are from like Venezuela, Cuba,
Okay.
Argentina. My boss, who's the CTO, he's from East Germany. And so they're like hardcore freedom advocates. I'm working on getting them all fully orange pilled. But yes, it is a crypto company.
So what exactly? So I've looked it up a little earlier today. So I didn't deep dive on your
No,
employer,
that's
but
okay. I
it's
don't.
crypto ATM or Bitcoin ATMs. There's a wallet, and then there's some point of service type merchant stuff, right?
Yeah, so we're working on being able to enable like full circular economies. They are one of the original Bitcoin ATM companies. They started a Bitcoin ATM company in 2016, and only recently, I would say in the past year or so, did they start trying to develop or working on developing additional products. And so that's what I do is I'm the director of product development there, and we're working on a merchant system and a wallet that we have. So yeah, I got that job actually because of my ranting on Twitter. And I tell people that, you know, since I've really only been tweeting for less than a year actually. I didn't get on Twitter until Elon bought it. Um and it took me a little while. I'm like, am I sure that I want to like live stream everything I think? Because everything I think is a little radical. But once I did that, like it just opened so many doors, and I definitely lost some people, but it brought the right people into my life. So, I have the best friends in the world. I love my job. Even though they're not all 100% hardcore Bitcoiners, it's like, you can't argue with someone who has actually lived under communist rule when they're saying like, you know, if I want to buy my shitcoin, whatever. Like we have a system by which we do and don't list coins, and I would love to help them go fully Bitcoin only one day, which might happen. Um, but for the time being, just to be working in the industry, it's been a really interesting journey, just that piece of my journey. Um, it has brought me back into kind of by force, you know, I don't want to say politics, but certainly regulation. Like all of the decisions that we make, unfortunately, are really driven by the regulatory environment. And
Mhm.
it's not something I'm very optimistic about in the United States right now.
Well, that's actually a question I wanted to bring up because I know you were in El Salvador recently. You said you've been to Colombia. You've been all over the place. There are
Yeah.
all these Bitcoin communities popping up. Well, first of all, you brought up a term that a lot of Bitcoiners throw around, the circular economy. Can you describe
Yes.
what that is? Because I think it's going to be a foreign term to a lot of people.
Yeah. I should be better prepared for this answer, but it's like a local community, a circular economy, meaning that you can really like do everything that you need to do from an economic perspective. So I like to think of it as having the ability not to need a bank. So a circular economy, you can buy, sell, trade, do, basically any commerce that you might need to trade in can be done locally. You don't have to, send money away or travel to the bank. Um, so we're kind of like banking communities that are unbanked and enabling them to trade amongst themselves uh,
Yeah.
in, Bitcoin, hard currency.
One of the ways I think about it is so if you're in the US spending Bitcoin, so there's a lot of vendors that'll take Bitcoin for things, but then they immediately turn it into fiat.
Right.
They're not valuing Bitcoin as Bitcoin. And some of these circular economies, like in El Salvador, they're trading in Bitcoin, they're paying their employees in Bitcoin,
Right.
they're keeping it all within the community. So that's kind of
Yeah.
you're creating the Bitcoin circling around. It's building
Right.
value there. It's not
Yeah.
just immediately being cashed out for fiat like it would be with a big US corporation.
Right. Right. Exactly.
So self-banking is another term that comes up in the crypto world a lot. And I think this is honestly it's probably the most important financial term that people are going to need to know over the next
Yeah.
like 50, 100 years. With the central banks are going to collapse. They just have to.
Hmm.
Rothbard and people have been predicting this forever. It's happening
Right.
way slower than we thought it would. But we're at
But it's happening. It's
what
finally happening. I
30
mean,
$33 trillion national debt,
right.
trillions of dollars pumped into the economy. It's got to happen eventually. Anyway,
Slowly and then suddenly. And I think we might get to witness the suddenly.
oof, I hope you have some Bitcoin when it happens.
Right.
Um, but self-banking, can you just kind of describe that as a concept? Because that's really central to kind of your life view at this point, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, um, just being able not to have a bank account. There's I think it's 8 billion people in the world that don't have access to a bank account. And there's various reasons for that. Geographically, people in the United States are used to having many banks on many corners around them. I think we are seeing that trend backwards where all of these bank branches are closing. So if you think about like rural America and perhaps having to travel a couple of hours to go to a bank, you may be a person that's kind of unbanked. Now we're kind of hedged against that because we have access to online banking. But there are a lot of people around the world who can't do their banking online, whether it's because of infrastructure reasons, they don't have reliable internet, or they might live in an economy where, banking services are not offered online. I mean, this is really like a niche market where you can do everything online and on your phone. So I think it's something that a lot of people in the United States and in the Western world have become completely unaware of, just this concept that people don't even have access to a bank account. So they're transacting in dollars if they're lucky, whatever the local currency is. And then they're turning around and spending that and buying whatever they need to do. So there's no bank involved. And allowing them to bank themselves, meaning that they can save a little bit of money, put money somewhere that it's safe. But doing all of these things that we take for granted and being able to do them without a bank, so kind of banking yourself, um, I think is a super, super powerful concept. It's something that so Byte Federal actually has all of this functionality built out. And it was live in our wallet. Unfortunately, with Choke Point 2.0, which was this crackdown in regulation that happened at the beginning of this year, we've had to pause those services. But we are looking at other places around the world where we could offer those services. And we are hoping that next year the regulatory environment changes so we can flip the switch and turn those services back on. So folks could bank themselves. You could use the app on your phone, which is a non-custodial app, and have all banking that you need, a routing number, an account number, a routing number, and that just provides access to your own non-custodial wallet where you can hold Bitcoin or, dollars if you choose or need to.
So non-custodial, can you define, because custodial and non-custodial, one of them is you own the actual crypto. The other one is someone's holding it onto it for you, basically.
Yes. Yeah, it's like fiction and nonfiction. You have to like sort it in your brain and then swap them, right? Because nonfiction is real and then vice versa. So non-custodial, I tell people to think of the wallet or the service. That is what you're describing. So when you say non-custodial, it means that the service or the product is not the custodian, and therefore you're the custodian. If something is custodial, it means that that product, service, app, whatever it is, it's holding your funds. And so if they go away, or if they're just completely fraudulent, like, FTX, Celsius, all of these things that we saw, they're going to take your money, your Bitcoin, your crypto with you. Non-custodial, meaning they are not the custodian. It's yours. It's completely within your own control. So if the product or service goes away, you should still have access. If you've done everything correctly, you should still have access to your Bitcoin.
Okay. So what regulations have been put in place this year? First of all, like there's a big presidential election coming up, and it looks like it's going to be Biden or Trump, unfortunately. And the only thing Trump knows about Bitcoin is that it's orange like him, so he likes it for that. But that's the only thing he knows. Biden has probably never heard the word. So, right. Who's running the show? Who's making these regulations? Because we're not getting to vote on it in any sense of the word.
Right.
And what's the big risk with the regulation? And are there any opportunities you're seeing? Like, how does the Bitcoin community proceed, or do we just have to get out of the U.S.?
There's a couple questions in there.
Yeah.
So we're not voting on anything. I think that's an important takeaway. I have gone on several rants on Twitter about rules, and there is a difference between rules, which sort of encompasses regulation, and laws, and people intermix them, but they're not the same. Rules and regulations are just decisions that the federal government makes kind of unilaterally. So I think a lot of times people hear crazy stuff and they think, oh, there's no way that will pass. But the problem is that we have all of these regulations that are being applied to our lives and nobody's voting on them. So there's no chance for them to pass or not pass. I think that's an important piece of awareness that we should work on spreading. And if you're a Bitcoiner and you don't understand that, look that up and try to start to look at that. In terms of the industry, really the biggest, most important thing that happened is that the current administration came in, and whoever said what to who, I don't know who's running the show. It's not Biden. It's kind of this unelected bureaucratic state in DC. But I think it's gotten more ingrained in that. But they basically came in and said nobody that is in crypto or Bitcoin. And this is another thing that I think this is a possible blind spot for the maxis, especially on Twitter, is that the people making the rules, they don't know the difference between Bitcoin and crypto. This is not a very popular opinion of mine, but the opinion is like Bitcoin kind of is subject to these rules and regulations more so than we want it to be. Bitcoin doesn't care, but people are citizens of a country. And unless those people are willing to be criminals, like they are subject to the laws that get enacted. So Bitcoin and crypto, the administration came in and said, if you're in Bitcoin or crypto, because we don't know the difference and we don't care, you can't have access to banking. So basically they unbanked all of the Bitcoin and crypto companies. And so it's pretty hard to do business if you don't have access to banking.
I have invested in several marijuana startups, and I know
Yes.
that it's crazy.
Yes. So same thing, except kind of more. Um, it's yeah, same. So marijuana companies, strip clubs, which operate as cash businesses, and are subject to all of this additional scrutiny and rules, and like you can use this software but you can't have access to these features, and I mean it's lunacy. Like the more in there you get, the more you're like, what is happening? um so it's been a little bit of a dose of reality for me, honestly. I think the last question you had was like, what do Bitcoiners do? Like, do they just leave the United States? And I'm struggling with this. Because I tend to say like, yeah, like fuck it. Like let's all go to El Salvador. But I know that not everybody can do that. And so it's not the right answer for everyone. My hope is that we can sort of shift the tide back. I think there's a lot of areas, there are a lot of things in the United States that need rebalanced, and this is obviously one of them. I think there's probably more pain to come in terms of regulation. We're going to get sort of swung into it really seriously, and then I'm hoping that it balances back out. Um, and so what does that mean? It may mean that adoption slows a little bit. I think, we're seeing institutional interest in Bitcoin, which has pushed adoption, whether people like it or not. Kind of gives some legitimacy to Bitcoin as an asset class. Um, so we'll see. There's fear, of course, that they will make self-custody illegal. And I think there's a chance that they might, but no one's going to comply and it's not going to last.
Yeah, this is one of the cases where I think it's kind of hard because it's financial and tax law is nationwide. But I think there's like Governor DeSantis, your governor down in Florida. He at least tried to ban CBDCs. I think he's kind of a pro crypto industry, especially because Miami is a huge hub for it now. So nullification on the local level might actually save save us from these regulations, because
Right.
a governor or a state can pass a law which will outstrip a regulation on the federal level. So you'll have court cases and stuff, but nullification is a path that we could go to. Kind of, I mean, it's how cannabis became legal,
Right.
basically
I
in
was going to
every
say
state.
it's
So
a very parallel path. I do have to give a plug in because the FBBA, which is the Florida Blockchain Business Association, wrote the CBDC bill that DeSantis passed, and Byte Federal was the founding member of the FBBA. So we are very, very involved in all of that that's happening here in Florida. And I totally agree. I think it's a good path forward for what's happening in the United States is at the state level for governors to fight. And, the way that has paved a path for cannabis, I think if worst case scenario is that's kind of what we see with Bitcoin.
So I want to change tax a little bit. You're working in the Bitcoin industry, which it's funny. I think we're about the same age. I'm 38. When I was graduating college, Bitcoin hadn't been invented yet. I graduated in 2007. It came out in 2008. So like you couldn't have seen this industry coming. There's no way to prepare for it. Like, how would you recommend, I guess, somebody young today, they're graduating high school, they're trying to think about their career. The world is going to change just as fast as it did in our lifetimes for them. We have AI, we have this entirely new world forming. We have a libertarian president in Argentina. And so you're going to have a libertarian versus socialist wars in South America. How do you prepare for this world to grow up and be a successful adult with the rapid pace of change?
Yeah. Well, I don't say this lightly, but be prepared for anything, right? You have to be flexible. People get like entrenched in a path and perhaps they think they're young and they think, here's what I'm going to do. You have to be prepared to do something completely different. You have to be flexible. Certainly when I was graduating and even for many years, I mean, I never imagined I'd be in this position. It didn't even exist. And so being flexible, I think, has always worked really strongly in my benefit. And then just solve problems. For me, I think of myself just like as a problem solver. And that was really the key to the career that I had, because being in a startup environment, like, you don't ever have a job description. You just do what needs to be done. And so I learned that wherever I saw problems or something that wasn't happening that needed to happen, I went and I did that. And so you're really providing real value, you're solving real problems. And I think that's the most important thing. It doesn't matter exactly what that looks like, whether you're end up in the trades, building houses or providing, actual services. There's all of these like kind of fake office jobs, and I think a lot of those might go away. We're
Yeah.
going to see the return of like actual jobs that bring value, but just be flexible and solve problems.
Yeah, I'll double down on that. When I was starting my career as a freelance writer, I
Yeah,
brought in to write like marketing material, but then I saw they needed a little bit of design, so I would learn just enough to get the job done. Then they would need their
right.
WordPress site fixed, so I would learn just enough to get the job done. Just be flexible, always be willing to learn. Like
Exactly.
learning how to learn is probably the most valuable skill you can get in the economy today and for the future. So yeah, stay
Yeah.
flexible and understand the concept of value.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm always questioning everything, which has gotten me in a lot of trouble in life, but it's also gotten me a lot of successes, because it's like, well, why are we doing this? And do we need to be doing this? And I think it's kept my brain really open to, learning new things, like you said.
So you were talking about El Salvador a little bit. We met through Twitter through Jethro, who is
Yeah,
the Bitcoin community connector at this point. Um,
he is.
I'm planning on making a 3-week trip in April, trying to do it
Okay.
entirely on Bitcoin. El Salvador is definitely one of my stops.
I saw
Um,
that. Yes.
but so what I'm finding that there are a lot of resources, but some of it feels like cheating because they're just taking your Bitcoin and then buying the tickets for you and stuff. Um, so I mean, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to have done the whole trip in Bitcoin. But what other businesses do we need to start? Like, what's the entrepreneurial opportunities out there that you can see the need for right now that doesn't exist or doesn't exist well yet?
Yeah. Um All of them. So one of my favorite things that I have started to hear more and more is, whatever you do, bring it to Bitcoin. Not everyone is going to be a technical product developer working on Bitcoin products. That's like a really niche job. I'm like profoundly thankful to have it. But not everyone, there's not enough of those jobs, and that's not everyone's skill set. Whatever you do, whatever you're good at, bring it to Bitcoin, bring it to Bitcoiners. So like you said, there's this sort of in between where people will take your Bitcoin and provide whatever, they're turning around and you have to do things in fiat. Um, but we can create our own circular economies. If you're buying something and it has to be bought in fiat, and so you're dealing with like a broker or whatever, like, look at that end point, and is that something that you can offer in return for Bitcoin, and not convert it to fiat, keep it in Bitcoin. So whatever it is that you do, whatever you're good at, just go and do it. And do it for Bitcoiners, accept Bitcoin, keep it in Bitcoin.
We need, and this is gross because I hate the IRS. It's if there was one thing we could abolish, it would be IRS. But to actually do business in Bitcoin, I had Matt Cercily on, who's he's a lawyer and he does tax advice and prep type stuff. And
Yeah.
he was talking about the way you have to account for accepting Bitcoin. You have to account for the cash value of the Bitcoin at the time you like accepted it. So what we need is somebody to build a QuickBooks for Bitcoin, like
Yes.
that can automatically translate this, keep the records. Like it needs to be integrated into the sales, like point of sale devices, because
Right.
if we're going to be operating, unfortunately, I'm an agorist when it comes to obeying the law. So you do the absolute minimum, but I'm not going to jail
Right.
over this stuff, and they will
Right.
send you to jail. So yeah, I mean,
Absolutely.
I could see a lot of opportunities even in gross industries like those.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a fantastic product idea, like a QuickBooks, to make it easier for businesses. This is one of the complexities that we're finding on the merchant end with Byte Federal, is all the complications that a merchant needs to keep track of. If you're a small business, an individual merchant, it's very simple, it's straightforward. You can just have a Bitcoin wallet. But if you're running a full business, Yeah, anything that's needed, whether it's accounting for taxes, accounting to keep track of inventory, all of these things are going to need to be built out. Um, yeah, it's a terrible idea, but it's also a fantastic idea because we're citizens of the country that we're citizens of, and unless we give up our citizenship, we have to follow their rules.
Yeah,
So.
I mean that's the great thing about agorism is it's Matt Sersley described as when he does tax compliance, it's malicious compliance. He's obeying the laws but maliciously, which
I like it.
yeah, it's a great phrase. And he's agoristaxadvice.com, so he's totally in that camp.
Okay. Does he do taxes for Bitcoiners?
I don't think he does. He doesn't do the taxes. He does the strategy. So you'll still
Okay.
need. I don't know. It's great. There's a great episode, and you can go visit his website.
I'm gonna listen to this one. I haven't seen that one, but I'm gonna find it and follow him because this sounds like a great strategy to me.
All right. There's a debate that I think you kind of chimed in on Twitter a little bit in one of my threads, and it was the know your customer stuff. Like I would ideally love to go peer to peer. Keep the know your customer is basically I have to give my driver's license. They have to know everything about you. Make sure you're not a criminal, quote unquote, to be able to transact or buy Bitcoin or do anything at the, I guess the purchase level. I can transfer it around wherever I want once I own it, but then it's trackable. Like that's the advantage of the blockchain. It's the same disadvantage. There's no privacy if they know the starting point. So
yes,
I mean, how do you work? Because I'm sure you guys are KYC compliant. You have to be to be running a company in America. What is it actually your Bitcoin if they know where it started and there's no privacy in it? Because that's the kind of debate. It's like they're going to come for it if they know you have it.
So my thoughts on this have evolved, being in the role that I'm in, and just with the regulatory crackdown. I was relatively, maybe naively agnostic about it, and now I'm not so much. Now I'm kind of like, yeah, forget this. But you can't do business in the country, and you can't do business in a lot of places. Like El Salvador requires KYC AML. Because they require access to SWIFT. So this is a much bigger problem. And the anarchist in me just wants to say, like, fuck it, burn it all down, and we'll all transact.
Yeah, SWIFT, just by the way, is the international transfer system. So it's how banks communicate with each other. If you get cut off SWIFT, that's what they did to Russia to try and isolate them in the beginning of the invasion. So yeah, sorry, I just wanted to make sure everybody understood.
That's so if you need dollars, which El Salvador runs on dollars, Bitcoin is legal tender, but so are dollars. You basically have to have access to SWIFT. And so if you want access to SWIFT, you have to have a KYC AML policy, which is what we just saw happen with Binance, right? They didn't have a robust enough policy. I don't think that they weren't KYCing in the United States. And so then they left the United States. So do you really own your Bitcoin? Did you ask me, do you really own your Bitcoin if it's KYC'd?
Well, that's the debate. I think you own your Bitcoin, but
you do if it's in cold storage.
Yeah, I have everything. This is actually one of the things I have to adapt for on this trip is everything I have, I buy it and put it in cold storage. Like I don't ever use Bitcoin. So that's one of the reasons I'm going to spend a Bitcoin on a trip, on a 3-week trip, which is a lot of money to spend on a 3-week trip. But it's just because I want to kind of get used to using it. Also, I'm going to make a splash and it'll be really fun to spend that much money.
I think it's awesome.
But there's a lot of practical things to it. But yeah, I mean, I keep it in cold storage. So I own it. And unfortunately, I probably lost it in a boating accident. So, all the passwords burned. I don't know.
Right. But you're going to buy some new Bitcoin to spend on your trip. You can keep it in a non-custodial hot wallet. I like to tier the amounts, right? So your Bitcoin in cold storage and then a little bit in a hot wallet. And then you'll need a Lightning wallet. And you want to tier that. Like I think of Lightning, most Lightning solutions are custodial. So it's like the cash in your pocket. Like you might lose it. But you don't ever want to keep that much in there. But I think it's awesome what you're doing. I do think that you own it. It's like, even if you're a criminal and you're making a bunch of money, like you can turn around and spend that money. You might get in trouble for it, but it was your money. No, I think you own it. I think there's possibly a scenario by which they come after Bitcoin in cold storage the way that they came after holding gold. But even that being sort of the most extreme possible to me scenario, I'm not even sure that they'll find that necessary. I think just the promotion of the ETFs and having paper Bitcoin, a lot of people are going to find that that's much easier and that's, what they end up doing. But do you own it? Absolutely, you own it because you can leave the country. You can take your hardware device. You don't even need your hardware device. You can get a new one and
Yeah.
restore your wallet and have access to it. So yes, you own it. Are you trackable? Absolutely. But it doesn't mean that you don't own something.
Yeah, it's actually, you have more of an argument that you own Bitcoin that's traceable than you own property in the US, right? If I stop paying my property
Absolutely.
taxes, like they can come after this house in a couple of years if I just don't
Exactly.
pay. So, and I can't pick this up and take it to El Salvador if I need to escape. It's
Exactly.
really hard to move 15 acres, I hear.
Right. Right. Yeah, I heard you're homesteading, aren't you?
I am failing at homesteading. I
Okay.
killed all of the vegetables this year. Um, it
Oh,
it was not good. So I
okay.
bought this whole freeze dryer thing to save all the vegetables I was going to make, and I got like
Yeah.
4 zucchini and 6 tomatoes. I'm so bad. I learned a lot though. I learned a lot this year.
All right. Well, that's what matters. You can try it again or, learn. Sometimes you learn that things are not for you.
Well, it's interesting because I don't know. One of my plans is to establish another beachhead kind of outside the U.S. So
Yeah.
I was originally looking in the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. I love Mexican people. I love the culture down there. And Merida, that area in the Yucatan, is super safe.
Okay.
Now I'm really thinking El Salvador, just kind of there'll be a Bitcoin network there, although there is Bitcoin Yucatan. So they're trying
Yeah.
to start the same kind of thing there. There's also the Bitcoin jungle in Costa Rica, Bitcoin beach in El
Uh-huh.
Salvador. There's all these different communities popping up. So
Guatemala. There's a lake in Guatemala. I don't remember the name. I will find it. There's a person that runs the community. I'm gonna find it and send it to you. So if you want to add that to your trip, I heard it's really beautiful.
maybe that I have a friend that owns a property down in Guatemala. Tain Nix has actually been he's done the course, the Plan B Escape the United States course. So
Cool.
uh, he has Guatemalan citizenship too. Where if you had to escape, where would you go right now?
Right now, I'd go to El Salvador.
Berlin or the Bitcoin beach? Where are you settling?
I really liked San Salvador. I'm not really a city person, but there was so much energy in San Salvador. I liked it a lot. Either I would live in San Salvador, um, be a part of the economic community that's developing there, or Bitcoin Beach. I would go up, and visit Jethro in Berlin, but I'm a beach person. I've been in Florida for a while now. Even in Dubai, I lived on the beach. So it would probably be El Zante or Surf City. Do you know about Surf City?
No.
So El Zante gets a lot of attention, and that's where, the Hope House is, and you've got this community. But just about like 15 minutes, I'm gonna say north, but I actually have no idea what direction it is, up the coast. You have Surf City, where the like Olympics of surfing was held a couple years ago. And so they have a pretty established community there. It's like a surf bro central, and it's a really cool place to visit. There's a fair amount of Bitcoin adoption that's happening there as well. Um, so definitely hit that up.
So, all right, let's say you couldn't escape the U.S. Which state would you continue to live in? Florida? Would you uh, find another? I know Tennessee has some attractive qualities. Florida's so muggy. It's like
No, I I do not visit. I don't even visit the Northern Territories anymore. Okay. I don't know that I have any interest in going north of Florida. Like Florida it is. Now that being said, um there's a clock that's running, right? Like we've got DeSantis kind of protecting. And look, DeSantis has his flaws. I'm not like a huge fan of any politician really, but for now I think we have this like stronghold of safety in Florida. There's nowhere else that I would live right now in the United States.
What about Puerto Rico? I know there's actually a lot of Bitcoiners down in Puerto Rico. There's a lot of so people in the podcasting and info publishing world. I had a friend that I do copywriting, so I write these big promos and I get a cut of the sales, a royalty they call it. I had a friend that had a promotion do $40 million right after he moved to Puerto Rico, and he saved like hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes alone. Like there are some tax advantage places to be, although I don't know, the infrastructure in Puerto Rico is not the best.
Yes. So I was in Puerto Rico a couple of years ago. I actually, a little known fact, I'm actually half Puerto Rican by blood. So Puerto Rico is an option. The infrastructure definitely it needs to be rebuilt. There are some challenges in Puerto Rico. Taxation is not one of them. I think it's hugely beneficial from a tax perspective. So that is definitely a draw. If shit really hits the fan and I can't, for one reason or another, end up in El Salvador, I think Puerto Rico is a very good option.
All right. We're coming up on an hour now. So we got to wrap this up soon. But what's a topic in the crypto Bitcoin world that people aren't talking about enough that you think might be an issue or an opportunity over the next few years? Is there a topic you can think of that's just not getting the attention you think it should?
One that's not real fun or sexy is UTXO management. Is that something that do you even know what that means?
No, I do not.
Okay. So UTXO management is like your transactions. And so it's something I can't explain it quickly. There was somebody just did a little video that I retweeted. You can find, I'm going to send it to you. So figure out what UTXO management is and do a better job at it. I myself am working on doing better at this. I think it needs more attention. It's something, as the network grows, we're going to see a lot of development with layer 2 and layer 3 solutions. And that sort of comes back to the reason that is needed is because of the way the UTXOs work.
Well, that is very confusing. I'm going to have to dive deeper. If you said there's a video, I'll post it in the show notes if you can send that to me.
Okay.
Just so
yeah, I'll send that to you. It's like a short 5-minute video. And then my biggest thing is like, speak up, people, because it's about to be too late. The thing that I was not expecting when I started running my mouth was to meet people even within the Bitcoin community, and the number one thing that people say to me is, I'm so glad you said this or that. Like, you say everything that I think and I can't say. And I'm like, look, I know that some of my opinions are radical, but most of them are not. And you should feel free to say anything that you think. And we've gotten to this place that we're in because people are too scared to speak up. And if you don't start speaking up, you're not going to be able to very soon. So
amen to that. This is why my main course that I sell is on freelancing, because once you're a freelancer, you become uncancelable. Like this whole world it's a lot of the fears that you have around your employer if you work for a big institution can go away. You can also find a good employer. There's plenty of them out there. A lot of small businesses, a lot of medium-sized businesses. Just stay away from the woke megacorps, and like you're not going to get fired for this stuff.
Right. Or do it in mass, right? Like they might single you out, but if your entire department has opinions, whether they're all the same or not, if everyone is out there with their opinion, at some point this trend of getting people fired will go away because it's not scalable. They only get away with it because they can hyper target you because there's just one lone person somewhere. But if everyone is running their mouth, they can't fire everyone.
They could try, but the backlash is already here. I mean, you see, there's a lot of things I don't like about like Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire, but their counterculture stuff is hilarious. Like they're building the whole thing. You can build your own infrastructure. We're going to build parallel economies. That's the point of Bitcoin. You're not going to get canceled in the Bitcoin community unless you're really, really a horrible person. And it's just, there are lines, but they're pretty far away from where they're being drawn right now.
Right.
All right. Where can people follow you?
Just on Twitter. I'm just on Twitter until I get canceled from Twitter, and then I'll be on Nostr. I am on Nostr, but mostly on Twitter, and that's it.
All right. We'll post your links there in the description.
Okay.
Michelle,
Okay, cool.
thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It was great to talk to you, and I look forward to following your trip.
Yes, it's going to be great.
Let me know if I can connect you with anybody else or answer any questions for you.
Oh, as soon as I get into the planning phases, probably January, I'm going to have so many questions. I'm going to be like, so follow me on Twitter too, guys, at Henry Bing, and
Yeah.
you can follow my journey.
Yeah, Bitcoiners, follow Henry. We're going to support his journey on Bitcoin.
And follow Michelle Weekley. All right, everybody, till next time, stay free.